Interview recorded on October 13, 2009, with Maxwell driving through the streets of London. It was touch and go. He was about to do his very last date in a week or so. Successful sweep of Europe. His first transatlantic tour in 11 years. Steve Ripley, the London independent promotion and PR guy who had been working arduously to make it happen, has already told me that the artist in question never does interviews on the days he's performing. He's ending his trek with a sold-out show at the Brixton Academy in London on Friday, October 13th. I see hope slipping away until Steve sends me a text saying if I'd be willing to do my interview traveling from a train station to a hotel. I meet Maxwell after he walks through the doors after getting off the famed Eurostar from Brussels. He's unassuming, dressed casually, and with throngs of people scurrying about back and forth through St. Pancras International, no one accosts him for an autograph or stops him to ask if he really is the music man who just a week or so before held the entire audience of the Hammersmith Apollo in the palm of his hand as he mesmerized with a great solid performance that included his classics and new material from his then much anticipated latest CD, BLACKSummersnight. As we walk through the terminal, I share with him that he is the fourth person I've interviewed in transit from one destination to another. The first, Earth, Wind & Fire founder Maurice White, in a 1975 conversation that literally changed my life and my spiritual direction, flying from Los Angeles to Seattle. The second, later in 1975, riding in a limousine from JFK to Manhattan with renowned Philly producer-songwriter Tom Bell, just as impactful from a creative standpoint. And the third, a few days later, after my conversation with Tom, with the artist he had just produced, the legendary Dionne Warwick, who provided my introduction to soul music 11 years earlier with Walk On By, driving from Union Station to her hotel in Washington, D.C., where she and Tom were promoting the brilliant Track of the Cat album. Maxwell seems elated that he's in such esteemed company, that he follows White, Bell, and Warwick as my fourth traveling interviewee. We reach the car, and Maxwell, 14 years into his recording career, coming off a 7-year hiatus from performance, is relaxed and engaging. All right, well, this is an interesting way to do an interview in a car going from St. Pancras Station to your hotel. I'm talking with Maxwell, who just got off a train from Brussels.
Yes, from Brussels.
Right. Were you just performing in Brussels, or?
Yeah, we did a show last night.
Right.
Really incredible.
Yes.
Scene over there. Apart from the waffles and the chocolate.
Okay.
There was some serious soul music lovers.
Yes.
I saw a few familiar faces from other, sectors in Europe. So
Yes.
that was like amazing to see sort of reoccurring faces.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like it's interesting for me because being 36 now, and I'm always very proud to say that because I feel like I'm much more of a man than I was, even though I was trying to purport a great deal of maturity in my 20s. But the beauty of Europe has just blown me away this time around. So much so that I can honestly see myself finding some place to sort of settle here, not permanently, but just as a getaway, go somewhere else kind of a place,
Wow. Is there any particular place in Europe that has appealed to you in that way?
I got a few on the list, so I'm still sort of figuring out what would be nice. But of course, Paris, London.
Yes.
I thought Brussels was amazing.
Wow.
But I guess between those two, they really set me off, just the architecture and the beauty, and
Yes.
it's amazing.
And how have you found European audiences to be, for the most part?
Well, surprisingly, I'm shocked by the demographic and the wide range of demographic. I thought I was going to see people who were mid-30s like myself and older. The revival, so to speak,
Sure.
kind of audience. But I was shocked to see, kids in their 20s,
Yes.
college students. I was kind of amazed by that. And the other thing that surprised me the most, and it kind of shocked everybody else too, everybody that's part of, this team that is from America that's been here, is that the new music received like just as equal of a roar, so to speak, than the old stuff. I thought the old records Till the Cops Come Knocking, Ascension, Get to Know Ya, things that I had done before would be just the things that would be that people want to hear the most. But when we get into Pretty Wings and things like Stop the World and Help Somebody and playing Possum, which is an acoustic set that we usually do throughout within the show, just sort of like, you know, it's kind of like coffee and perfume in a perfume shop almost. Coffee beans in a perfume shop. But it was just amazing to me to see that so many people knew the music and were into the new music, which is a huge compliment, you know, as you move through your life and career, where you don't feel like you're just kind of doing the greatest hits.
Right. Well, I mean, I know it's unfair to compare, but how are European audiences different from American audiences, would you say?
Well, it depends on where you go. You know, the English are very reserved, you know, and you know, they can be completely like blown away, and it's almost like you wouldn't know that they are. But then you go to Paris and they like literally want to jump on stage with you and actually perform with you. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, I'm not one to sort of judge how people react to what I do. I'm just like grateful that there's like an audience there. Sometimes I'm shocked that people actually get up in the morning or get up that evening, that they get all lotioned up and, you know, they put their nice smelly good stuff on them, and the girls get all pretty, and the guys come out because they're trying to get the girls that are single at the audience, you know, in the audience. And it's shocking to me, man, like 11 years after the fact, to come to Europe and to have, you know, such a wide, I mean, I've seen bankers and businessmen, and I've seen like people in their 50s, 60s, and then I've seen 21-year-old girls. And I'm just like, what is going on here? You know, it's pretty amazing.
Well, I noticed, because when I came to see your show at Hammersmith, that, you know, one of the things that struck me was that you expressed a regular gratitude at different times. And if I could tell it was heartfelt. It wasn't just something to say. And I was just curious about, I mean, it seems that you really do feel that. You really do. It's really in what you just expressed, that people get themselves ready, they put on their clothes, they pay their money, so that...
They get babysitters. They, you know, they get dinner plans together, you know. It's, you know, it's money is not the same as it was before. You know, we don't live in a world of credit cards like we used to, where we're just like sort of in a fantasy land about what we actually own. So when you see people come out to see you and to represent and to not only support me, but I mean, I have like probably the illest band in the world, I think, personally. I mean, of course I'm biased, but...
Well, you're pretty correct. I think they were.
Like,
your whole section is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, they're
ridiculous.
They're amazing, and they sing, and then they all have their own separate records. I mean, Chris Davis is a virtual, like he's just a genius at playing. He's got like 6 drums. He has no toms. It's not anything traditional in terms of his drum setup. Then you got Robert Glasper, who's like the illest pianist, I mean, out in terms of jazz. You know, he's got his own album out called Double Booked, and that was #1 on iTunes in America. So it's like everyone's pretty accomplished, and then they've given me this great, you know, blessing, this great gift of being able to like support my music, music that I've written 13 years ago over the course of my life, and so it's pretty unique and special, you know. And it is heartfelt, you know, because I don't take it for granted. And I think being away so long, kind of the absence makes the heart grow fonder kind of thing. It's kind of like on that, you know. Just I really appreciate the audience. I'm not like, you know, like kind of over it, you know, like how people can get after a while. They
just get a little kind of jaded.
They get jaded, and you know, also just I feel validated for who I am musically, not who I am in terms of a style or in terms of a haircut or in terms of a movement in music or a trend or a fad. It's like this is like a real individual feeling that I didn't have when I stepped into the game when I first came out in the 96, you know. So it's very emotional.
When we talk to you about the, I don't know if I've read any interviews in which anyone asks you the title of why your album's called what it's called. Now maybe you have answered the question. I'd like to know, why is it called Black Summer's Night?
Well, it's a trilogy, and each of those 3 individual words sort of exemplify the tone of each album. Black being the more sort of heartbroken, love lost record. Pretty Wings is indicative of a relationship that just didn't work. And then, you got all these other songs like Cold and...
Yeah, I want to talk to you about those, a couple of songs.
Right,
Yeah.
and Stop the World, which
Yes.
is actually the most optimistic, and Phoenix Rise. Those are the only two optimistic records on the album. Summers is a much more uplifted feeling, It's all the Black Summer's Night trilogy, but for me, Summers is more of like what we'll do when you hear it, because it's all been written and done. All I need to do is basically do some overdubs, probably just before mix and master on the two that are coming out. But, there's an African gospel connection that I've always wanted to flirt with. Yes. And then on the third album, it's just a straight up bedroom.
Night.
Yeah.
Night.
Exactly.
Oh, night.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And it's almost like a good night almost as well to the entire trilogy itself. So that's probably why it's called the Black Summer's Night.
Gotcha. Well, I did want to talk to you about two songs in particular.
Sure.
Cold.
Right.
Because one of the things that struck me about the song was the rhythm of it. It has a really interesting rhythm pattern.
Right.
And I just want
windshield wiper, just so you know.
Say what?
It's a windshield wiper.
What is?
The rhythm of...
Oh, the rhythm?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Yeah, if you go to... I don't know if they even have this. You might be able to download this. On iTunes, there's like a 10-minute documentary on the album, so you can get more of a sense of who played on the record, because everyone that you see, save 3 members in the band, Latina, Timbali, and Robert Glasper, everyone except them, they've played on the record.
Okay.
So one time it's funny, I was going to go meet my ex-girlfriend who I eventually broke up with that night, funny enough, and the windshield wiper was kind of doing this thing. My engineer drove me over, and he had this just this really bad windshield wipers. This car was terrible, it was raining, and so it was doing this. So what we did was we dropped the microphone down from 10 stories from the studio. We recorded the windshield wiper, and then I kind of looped it, and then I kind of did some drum beat stuff on it, and then that's the makings of Cold.
That's deep.
And then, I kid you not,
I believe you.
You can hear it too.
Yeah.
If you listen close, you'll go, oh, that's
really
a windshield
funny.
wiper.
I want to ask you about the lyrical content of it, obviously.
Sure.
So given you shared the stories you just did, so was that song written based on the breakup that you just referred to?
Yeah, I mean, on some level, it's all kind of indicative of losing a relationship or just having a relationship, and so and I guess it's apropos to sort of step into it this way, because art is only really understood through some sort of anguish or pain, like if I would have come in all chipper and happy and oh my God, I'm just floating through the clouds, everybody. I don't know if people really kind of I don't know. I like, my favorite songs are the saddest songs sometimes.
Yeah.
Or the optimistic songs, like gospel music kind of gets me excited. But a happy ass song doesn't do it for me. It's
I understand. Well, I think probably true to say that when you hear a sad song or a song that has some anguish in it, it's reflective of certain emotions, obviously, that people experience. And I agree with you. I tend to agree with you. That's kind of how I feel. I mean, I like songs that have a bluesy kind of flavor to them. That's kind of what I naturally kind of veer towards. And I think it is. I think this, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a happy song, but
I think honestly people need something. They need a sage. They need a conduit. They need something that actually help them metabolize and deal with whatever it is that they can't actually process. And I think music and art and literature and and even sunsets and sunrises and thunderstorms have a way of sort of being that get out of free jail pass or something for people.
It's like a catharsis. It's like cathartic.
Exactly.
You kind of. It's like music can sometimes be the way that you process as people in America would say,
Right, yeah.
the emotions that you're experiencing. So I totally got you.
So I felt my responsibility was to, it's not like I created this experience and made it all up and so that I could be this guy who's writing the sad songs.
Right.
It actually happened to me, I went away for 8 years. I met girls who didn't know me. I met people I had to introduce myself to, which was so refreshing. And I loved every minute of that. I can't even tell you. Because I knew that if someone felt something, they really felt it for who I was as a person. It wasn't about
what you did for a living.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm grateful for that, and I'm just happy that something good came out of something bad. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you actually that you kind of touched on something I was going to ask you is how was your everyday life for 8 years? I mean, did you just get up and do well, I guess they're ordinary things because we all do ordinary things, but I mean, did you spend your days doing the things that people do when they're not recording or performing? I mean,
I was always recording. I definitely wasn't performing. I definitely loved being able to not care about how I looked.
Okay.
Eat what I want, do what I want, be how I want.
Right.
It was really nice, especially after cutting my hair, because the anonymity level just went to 10.
Wow.
And I could just sort of re-engage myself in society. Not that I'm look, don't get it twisted, I'm not Michael Jackson.
Right.
I'm not, the Jonas Brothers, you know what I mean? I don't presume myself to be, even when I was at my height in terms of, in the beginning of my success, that the world would come flocking and mob me somewhere if I was walking down the street. It wasn't likely that was going to happen. But, just generally, it was just refreshing for me because I'm just not, I'm not into celebrity. I'm not, I don't carry myself like that. I'm I actually sort of think is something quite pathetic about it, being singled out and separated from humankind on some level. And I think your work has a tendency to suffer from it when you have been, when you are somewhat sequestered from everyday
life.
Yeah.
No, I'm right there with you. I mean, I totally get it. It's actually unusual here. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people over my life, and it's very unusual to hear someone actually say what you're saying.
Wow.
Because many people live in that kind of lofty, it's almost like an insulated life, and they lose touch with everyday life and everyday emotions and everyday experiences because they're living in some other reality.
Yeah, and it's hard not to go into that reality after a while. When everyone starts to know who you are, you can only do what you can only do based on that. So for me to have orchestrated and in some ways have had and this was not planned at all. It's not like I woke up and said, okay, here's the ultimate strategy here. I'm going to go away for this much time, come back and do this. Year 5, I was scared like anybody would be scared. Wow, did I just throw everything away? Did I just give up the greatest gift ever that God has ever given me? And in some ways, that fear and that fear, and that regret kind of propelled me a little bit more too. It kind of gave me this sense of how it was before I even was signed. It was I was making this record not because I was trying to maintain a position or keep my spot in the game, so to speak, but it was an overture to all that had occurred and all that I hope I could possibly regain again.
Yes.
So that was to come from a place that pure, it only happens 2 or 3 times in your life.
Right.
I got it twice, and I think the only next time I'll probably get it is when I see my first child. When I see my first kid, and I look into her or his eyes, and I'm like, wow, now this is some pure shit right here. But it doesn't happen often.
No, it's
but
true.
I'm grateful that the success has been what it's been. That people remembered me.
Well, yeah. I wanted to ask you. Obviously, listening to your music, I'm very conscious of you having listened to many classic soul music artists. I'm wondering who is still around that we could consider legends or people that you would like to work with.
I got 3 people.
Oh, you got it ready. Good.
Right. I had the pleasure of meeting Aretha Franklin. I'd
Yes.
love to work with her.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of going. I've met Stevie Wonder a number of times, but when we began the whole like radio promotion for Pretty Wings, way back when, I went to his radio station. I think it's WKJLH or
Yeah.
something like that. And
KJLH. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
and he wanted to work with me, and I was like, absolutely. And then the other person that's on my list for sure is Smokey Robinson.
Oh, okay.
Because
Cool.
I heard a current record that he did,
Yes.
and it's like his voice is still amazing.
Yes.
I mean, like, I'm like, my God,
Mm-hmm.
your voice still kills.
Yep.
You know, and people don't realize how many people he's inspired. I mean, there are people who are not living, of course, that I would,
Sure.
you know, of course, Marvin Gaye, of course, Eddie Kendrick. I
Mhm.
mean, he's got one of the most beautiful
Oh,
falsettos
yeah.
ever known, ever
Mhm.
made, ever recorded. But
Well, there's an album. I just was going to ask you. There's an album of it, since you mentioned Eddie Kendricks. Have you ever heard an album of his called "People Hold On"?
no.
You got to check it. You got to find that, man. "People Hold On." It's actually a part of It's part of a whole Eddie Kendricks like 2 CD set that you can get, and it was a concept album, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's probably one of the most underrated, brilliant albums of all time. So yeah, it's called "People Hold On." I'm glad you mentioned Eddie Kendricks, because a lot of times people don't.
Oh, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, just
Did you
amazing.
see that documentary that they did of the Temptations?
I did.
I think it was on. I think you guys did it, the BBC.
I think the BBC did it.
Because you
yeah.
guys have like insane documentary
Oh,
about.
yeah.
You have such a. It's like
A different-
the illest encyclopedia
Yes.
of like American culture. You have Jules Holland, who
Right.
always has whatever's happening current
Yes.
and of somewhat substance. You know, it was an honor to even play that show for the second time with the 12-year gap, of course, in
Yeah.
between both performances.
Well, you should. Yeah. Well, you should also. If you go to my website, soulmusic.com,
Okay.
it's pretty easy to
I'll do
remember.
that. I'll do that now.
There's a whole article on Eddie Kendricks on that particular album. It talks about the album from an interview we did in 1970. I don't even remember what it was, 72 or 73. So that's something for you to read, and that is something that I think that you're right. British people, European people, and Japanese too seem to have a certain kind of.
Soulmusic.com.
Yeah. That's it. www.soulmusic.com. It's not the easiest name to get, I gotta tell you.
Okay, I don't know how you did it, but you
Well, I had to pay for it.
you have to keep paying for it, keep paying.
No, I just somebody had it for sale, and I just bought it. But
So
it was
indefinitely, or is it like?
yeah, no, it's mine until somebody buys it from me.
Okay, well,
eventually.
you're here. I'm gonna go check you out.
Cool. There's a lot to
See
read.
Melba more.
Yeah, there's a lot to read. You'll be there for a long time. Trust me.
Wow.
All right. Well, let's go into. So I'll ask you about legends now of contemporary music artists. Who would you like to work with that you haven't worked with amongst your contemporaries?
Oh, geez, that's such a tough question because I'm so against the overly featured album thing.
Okay.
Like, I just think that albums have become compilation records. They're not albums anymore.
Yes.
And so as far as like sometimes when it's like about, I would love to work with Sade because she never worked with anyone.
That's a great match.
But then at the same time, it would almost be sacrilegious because I love the fact that she doesn't work with anyone. So she's
True.
like the one that kind of like always rings out for me.
Right.
But for other, there are a lot of people that I think are amazing. But I'm always looking for that pure connection that hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
I'm cautious of people who they've worked with 20, 30 other people, so it's like it doesn't mean anything to actually work with them. But it'd be great to work with Femi Kuti or someone much more obscure, not like a singer or
Non-obvious.
so to speak, but someone like that would be great.
Now, when
Banshee. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I thought that was. Never mind.
Okay. All right. Okay. I was going to ask you. When you're relaxing and listening to music yourself, and you decide to go back in the day, as they say, who would someone most likely walk into your living room and hear you listening to, or your car, or or wherever you might be when you decided, I just want to listen to some old school music? Who would you be playing?
I mean, I definitely love Bill Withers and Isley Brothers. For me, kind of, they just do it for me for some reason because they have a bit of a rock element. They're soulful, but they have a folk thing too.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And I love when music kind of crosses boundaries, when I don't feel like it's a black person or a white person or, you know, it's just like, this shit is good, you know?
Yes.
And I love that about what they do. Particularly there's like an album called Beautiful Ballads. It's like a compilation record that has all their just really great kind of like heavy guitar ballads, and that's kind of rare for R&B soul music. Usually it's all computerized, it's all keyboards, it's all drum machines, but for them they kind of always have like a bit of, they'll have a rock solo in the middle of something, and I'm like, I can definitely mess with this.
Did you ever hear their version? They had an album back in the 70s.
Todd Rundgren's original?
Yeah, Hello, It's Me. Yeah, and then there's really?
That's my favorite
Hello,
song.
It's Me. It's amazing.
Todd Rundgren.
Yes, that's the
amazing.
original. Yeah, and then there's they also did a version of Bob Dylan's song called Lay Lady Lay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's on Beautiful Ballads.
Yeah, well, they were, I mean, I remember when those records came out, and they were kind of revolutionary for that time, because people were like, why, you know,
And the
it's
sound
kind
too,
of
right?
like, dang, you know, and Summer Breeze, and yeah, just amazing.
Amazing.
So I'm right there with you.
And it's funny, I heard, I don't know if this is true, because, you know, people say things and you never know, and all of a sudden you make The Power of Myth, so to speak, by Joseph Campbell. You know, there's a huge power in myth, but I heard that Marvin Gaye that was one of his most favorite, apart from his brother, that Ronald Isley was one of the singers that he just was like, this is a bad motherfucker.
Yeah,
right?
Ron Isley?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like this dude.
Yeah. No, he's ridiculous.
Like,
He's ridiculous.
I mean, there's a song called Sensuality.
Yeah, I know it.
Where there's like no reverb on his voice.
Right,
I think there's just a bit of plate on the voice.
Yes.
And then there's no hi-hat. They're rocking toms, a rim shot, and it's just I don't know. It's like sick. It's like a mountain or something.
Now, did you hear that kind of music growing up, or is this something you discovered later in life?
You know, I have to say, you know, I would hear it. You know, my mom was into country music. My mom is from the islands, so I don't know if you know, but in the Caribbean, country music is
Jim
a big
Reeves.
deal. I'm talking about Dolly Parton,
Parton.
Williams, and they love some country music.
Yes,
I don't know what
I do know that.
You know, so, but I kind of like gravitated towards it just from listening to Kiss FM as a kid, and then, you know, made friends, and, you know, growing up in my 20s, that my era was about celebrating the 70s.
Right.
And every era somehow celebrates the era that they were either coming up in, and it just goes on and on. Like, there's going to probably be a new crop of kids that are like coming in that are probably going to, I hate saying this because it ages me, of course, but they'll be talking about, you know, the 90s. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, they will.
So just as the 80s has been this big, huge thing.
Sure.
Where are we headed? Are we going to Mandarin Oriental?
I didn't know if we were going to Royal Garden first, but we're going to the Mandarin.
So we got Bill Withers, the Isley Brothers. Anyone else that we would be?
Oh, geez. Bobby Caldwell. I think
Yeah,
he's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
He's got like such a beautiful voice in every way. Don Blackman. He's got a record called Only You.
Yes.
I know that we should take.
I don't know. Is it Don Blackman?
Don Blackman.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I've heard of him. I haven't heard his music. Wow. So you really do kind of go deep into. It's not superficial, obviously. You really do check out the kind of music that a lot of people.
For you, actually.
Oh, cool.
Just so you can have it.
Yes.
Because I know I got it in here somewhere. Let's see, artists.
I love it.
It's a really good song. He's an insane piano player too, by the way. Yeah, hit this song, Holding You. You have to. I don't want to get into your interview because I know.
No, it's fine. We're doing fine.
Is what it is, but he's got these harmonies that happen later on in the song,
Yes.
and they're kind of like dissonant sets, kind of, and they're just makes me crazy, amazing. There's another English guy that I love too. I just wanted to point out Omar. I think
Omar's amazing.
I think Omar is like so underrated.
Yeah.
No one really realizes how instrumental he was to the movement that brought us on. I feel, because I feel like the English have a way of just sort of like starting it first somehow. You know, when you listen to drum and bass, and then you hear what Timbaland kind of created with Aaliyah.
Yes.
There's like a thread between that, I think.
Interesting.
And then there's a guy named Opaz.
No, I'm not familiar.
Paul Hayden.
I've heard of Paul Hayden. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he had this song with this guy called "When We're Making Love," and it just kind of brings me back because I think Pal Joey was the guy who did the beats then when beats were slow.
Yes.
And,
When
yeah,
beats were slow.
when beats
That's a
were
great
slow.
title for a song. When beats were slow. Well, you know, it's interesting you said that because I remember doing an interview back in like 1986 with Anita Baker at the time when she she had the album Rapture.
Right.
And she said that if it wasn't for Sade, she wouldn't have been able to make Rapture. So in other words, what you're saying is that a lot of times British musicians have even paved the way or opened the door for American soul music artists to come through.
Absolutely. Which
Which is kind of interesting. I think most British soul music lovers would not really realize that because
we're step cousins. There's like it's kind of like when you look at what was going on. You know, when all the Africans were being shipped over to America, and there were some Irish people in there too, and they had their hymns, and those hymns sort of merged into the gospel, that traditional gospel that you hear today.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's something really beautiful about the fact that music has always been indiscriminating in that way. You know.
Well, it is. You know, it does have a universality that nothing else does.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you know, and obviously you've just experienced that going to Europe and being in front of European audiences where probably everyone doesn't speak English.
Right. I had to learn a few things, which I have to continue learning because I think that the ultimate compliment that you can pay anyone is trying to speak something in their language.
In their own language, yes.